Today I'm going to discuss a thrilling drama film titled Monolith. Be warned, there are spoilers ahead, so watch out and proceed with caution. The film opens with an advertisement for a futuristic car brand named Monolith. In the ad, the presenter claims that this car is the safest vehicle in the world, featuring a variety of cutting-edge safety technologies. He lists features such as unbreakable glass, durable tires, a reinforced body, and more, all designed to protect the passengers from any possible theft or damage. The car is controlled via an AI-connected smartphone app, while a virtual assistant, Lilith, helps users navigate the car's interface. In the next scene, we meet Sandra, who is driving her young son David to his grandmother's house. As Sandra converses with Lilith, we learn that she is a mother of a 2-year-old boy, and her husband Carl is a pilot unable to join them due to his hectic schedule. The car is so advanced that it can even detect the weight of its passengers. Later, Carl calls to let Sandra know that he has just finished his shift at the Central Airport and misses them terribly. However, just as he's about to say goodbye, a knock is heard at the door, prompting him to end the conversation and leave. Meanwhile, David begins to grow fussy, and Sandra hands him her smartphone to keep him distracted. Sandra pulls into a gas station along the road, and after taking David into the restroom to change his diaper, she notices a group of girls giggling. Inside the station's supermarket, she buys David his favorite snacks. As she pays at the counter, she notices someone attempting to break into her car. Rather than panicking, Sandra calmly takes out her smartphone and locks the car using the app. While distracted by the situation outside, she fails to realize that David is no longer with her. When she realizes he's gone, she begins frantically searching for him throughout the store. She rushes outside and even calls a stranger, thinking that David might be with him. Sandra is completely frantic until she finds David, who's with the same 3 girls she had encountered earlier. She quickly puts David back in the car and activates the vault mode feature. This mode shuts the car down from any external disturbances, allowing her to take a breath and relax. After leaving the gas station, Sandra still has a long journey ahead to reach her mother-in-law's house. Feeling bored from the long drive, Sandra decides to call her childhood friend, Jessa. Jessa picks up and mentions that she's staying at a hotel near the Central Airport. Sandra, devastated, realizes that Jessa has been having an affair with Carl. Distraught by this revelation, Sandra doesn't even stop at her mother-in-law's house when she arrives. She keeps calling Carl, but he doesn't answer, claiming to be busy. Tired of his lies, Sandra decides to take matters into her own hands and heads to the Central Airport in Los Angeles to confront him. A highway sign tells her that Los Angeles is 320 miles away. Soon, Lilith, the AI assistant, informs Sandra that there has been a serious accident on the main highway, which will cause delays. The AI suggests an alternate route that could save time. However, the AI warns that the alternate route is deserted, with little to no traffic. Determined to confront Carl, Sandra doesn't hesitate and takes the bypass road. As night falls, driving becomes more difficult due to the thickening fog, which severely limits her visibility. The road ahead is completely isolated, with no other vehicles or signs of life. Sandra comes across an electrical substation in the middle of nowhere, but chooses to keep driving. Suddenly, Sandra's concentration slips, and she crashes into a deer crossing the road. The collision causes David to start crying, and Sandra, as usual, hands him her phone to calm him down. She exits the car to check on the deer, only to find it severely injured and trapped under the front of her car. This prevents Sandra from moving forward. In her focus on the deer, she forgets that David is left alone in the car. Meanwhile, David, distracted by the phone, accidentally opens the car's AI app. As he taps around, he unknowingly activates the car's vault mode. This feature is designed to protect passengers from external threats, locking them safely inside the car. Sandra, realizing the gravity of the situation, attempts to open the car door, but it's already too late. Out, Sandra tries desperately to communicate with David, but the 2-year-old is too young to understand her pleas. He continues playing with the phone, inadvertently dropping it under the seat, making Sandra realize the true capabilities of the monolith car. Sandra's attempts to break the car window with a rock prove futile, as the glass is indestructible. Frustrated, she decides to seek help elsewhere. She begins walking back toward the electrical substation she passed earlier. Upon arriving, she climbs over the fence and calls for help, but there's no response. The place is eerily empty with no workers around. Sandra enters a room in the substation and finds some essential items: a flashlight and a large wrench. She grabs them, hoping to use them to break the car window. As she exits, Sandra notices a wild animal following her. A coyote attacks her, forcing Sandra to climb onto the car roof for safety. Despite her efforts to scare off the coyote, the animal remains unfazed. In a last-ditch attempt, Sandra strikes the car with the wrench, setting off the car's alarm. The noise finally causes the coyote to retreat. However, Sandra notices that David is having trouble breathing. She calms him down as best she can, and he eventually falls asleep. After catching her breath, Sandra also succumbs to exhaustion and falls asleep on the car's bonnet. The next morning, she wakes to find the sun high in the sky. She rushes to check on David, finding him weak from hunger and dehydration. The car's display indicates the rising temperature, and Sandra realizes they're in serious trouble. The isolated location offers no hope of immediate help. Sandra decides to venture out in search of assistance, even though she knows it's risky to leave David alone in the sweltering car. After walking for miles and battling dehydration, Sandra finally comes across a river. She drinks and washes up, then continues on her journey. She encounters steep hills along the way, but eventually, she reaches an old abandoned airfield and discovers a jet. Meanwhile, the temperature inside the monolith car continues to rise, triggering the emergency cooling fan. Sandra enters the jet and finds alcohol, gasoline, a lighter, and some spare airplane tires. She drinks some alcohol for relief before gathering the necessary items. Sandra uses the gasoline to set fire to the tires in hopes of attracting help. She then fills the gallon with water from the river. Afterward, she retraces her steps back to where she left David. Upon reaching the car, Sandra finds David in a critical condition, his skin turning red from the heat. She calls out to him, but he doesn't respond. The temperature inside the car has soared, and the emergency cooling fans have failed. Desperate, Sandra climbs onto the roof of the car, attempting to cool him down with water, but her efforts are in vain. Sandra attempts to light a fire outside the car, hoping that the smoke would trigger the sensors to open the windows. However, the car's sensors detect the smoke and stop the emergency fans to prevent contamination inside. Exhausted, Sandra collapses, and she dreams of visiting this same accident site a year later with Carl. Sandra wakes up to a new realization and continues blaming Carl for David's death. Suddenly, she hears a noise and finds that it was all just a dream. To make matters worse, the coyote from the previous night reappears. Sandra hides and tries to climb on top of the car again, but is forced to slide underneath due to the intense heat. The coyote bites her leg, and Sandra realizes that the animal is after the deer she hit earlier. As the coyote drags the deer out from under the car, the vehicle begins to roll backward. The deer had been the only thing preventing the car from moving. Sandra struggles to stop the car from sliding, but despite her best efforts, it edges closer to the cliff's edge. The car is on the brink of falling, yet at the very last moment, a small chunk of rock obstructs its path, causing the car to come to a sudden stop. As Sandra stares down the cliff, she recalls a moment earlier in the movie when she had seen a cartoon at the gas station. In that cartoon, a diamond was obtained after breaking open a safe. She then realizes what she has to do. Determined, Sandra makes a split-second decision. She decides to push the car off the cliff, fully aware of the dangerous consequences, but with no other choice in mind. Her only goal is to unlock the car's doors and save her son. Sandra grabs the wrench and begins to break away the rock that is blocking the car's tire, all while the car precariously teeters on the edge of the cliff. After successfully removing the rock, Sandra takes one final breath and, with all her strength, pushes the car down the cliff. As the car tumbles, the monolith's inbuilt AI quickly reacts. It senses the fall and immediately adjusts the car's balance. Using its advanced technology, the AI shifts the gravitational pressure, ensuring the car falls upright, minimizing any potential harm to David. The AI is designed to deactivate the vault mode in the event of an accident, allowing rescuers to access the car and its passengers. As the car strikes the ground below, the doors finally unlock, allowing Sandra to rush down the cliff and approach the car. Despite the violent fall, the monolith car remains surprisingly intact, almost as though it had been gently placed there. Sandra immediately opens the car door, pulling David out of the vehicle. She quickly removes his clothes to cool him down, her hands shaking from fear and exhaustion. Seeing David's weakened state, Sandra knows they must leave the area immediately to get him the medical help he needs. Before she can climb back into the car, the entire system of the monolith vehicle begins to reboot. Sandra, in her state of urgency, quickly accesses the AI's interface with the help of Lilith. With the car now in extreme off-road mode, she begins navigating the steep cliff with ease. The vehicle, designed for extreme conditions, handles the rocky terrain effortlessly. Miraculously, Sandra and David make it through the rugged path, heading toward the nearest hospital. As the movie draws to a close, we see them arrive at the hospital. David is placed on a hospital bed, connected to various medical tubes, and Sandra watches over him with concern. She sits by his side, anxiously waiting for any sign of improvement. After a tense moment, David opens his eyes, and for the first time he looks up at Sandra and calls out, "Mommy!" The simple word brings immense relief to Sandra, and she smiles, overcome with emotion. The movie ends as Sandra, relieved and grateful, watches her son slowly recover. It's a bittersweet conclusion, showing the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child, even in the most trying of circumstances.